my colleagues, citizens, City of Atlanta. I'm honored to have my 6th budget presentation as the city attorney, my 10th as an employee of the City of Atlanta. I'm also pleased to introduce members of my team who are here with me. To my immediate left is Kimberly Patrick, who's a 26-year employee with the City Law Department. She's the Deputy City Attorney, my Chief Deputy City Attorney. To her left is Taya White, who's Director of Legal Operations, who's been with the city for 9 years. And to my right is Mayshire Bailey, Director of Legal Operations and Finance, who has been with the department for 10 years. I'd also like to acknowledge that I have members of my team who are currently in the audience for support, and I appreciate that. As Council Member Shook indicated, I would direct your attention to pages 165 through 78 of the budget book, where you will find the Department of Law featured, and we can move to our first slide if it's appropriate. You know I don't do that. Okay, slide 1 features, again, the administrative pillars of the Dickens administration, as well as the mission, one city with one bright future. To the left, we have our vision statement from the Department of Law, which is consistent with those pillars and informs the manner in which we carry out our responsibilities. We also have our shared values, which we emphasize on a regular basis, those being integrity, commitment to excellence, communication, collaboration, respect, and a sense of urgency. Next slide, please. This slide shows the organizational chart for the Department of Law. As you can see, the department has, well, currently we have 98 authorized positions. We are, however, proposing for this budget to eliminate 4 of those positions, and we will do a more explanation of that. But in reviewing the organization of the department, we thought it was important to look at those functions that, frankly, there's some that were obsolete as time progresses and lawyers are doing more of their own production. There's not as great a need for legal secretaries as there are with individuals who have greater skill sets. So by way of attrition, we've eliminated a few positions. We also have, of that 98, we have 55 attorneys, 39 individuals who are not attorneys. The budgetary impact of the elimination of the 4 positions amounts to about $324,000. And again, my team members will provide more details as we move forward. The next slide, please. By way of overview, our next few slides will highlight our operations, the proposed budget, litigation metrics, outside counsel metrics, and fiscal year 24 priorities for the law department. Moving to the next slide, I will now turn it over to Mayshire Bailey as well as Taya White.
Thank you, Ms. Hickson. Good afternoon, City Council members. The left side of the slide shows the overall operating budget for the Department of Law from FY21 actuals to the proposed budget for FY24. The proposed increase of $3.1 million from $21.5 million to $24.6 million from FY23 to FY24 is due to salary adjustments and general fund litigation matters that are outsourced to outside counsel. We will take a deeper dive into outside counsel spending across all funds later in the presentation. In terms of the current FY23 fiscal year, the projected overall spend is $21.8 million, down 3% from $21.3 million due to a slight projected decrease in outside counsel spending in the general fund and a decrease in outside counsel spending across the enterprise funds compared to FY22 actuals. An increase in outside counsel spending is, however, anticipated in the aviation fund in FY24 due to airport concessions matters. At this time, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Taya White, who will discuss the FY24 headcount breakdown by group.
Good afternoon, council members. The right of the slide shows the FY24 headcount breakdown by group. Of the 94 authorized positions, 8 are allocated to the Airport Legal Division, 28 to the Business Services Division, 10 to the City Attorney Group, 9 to the Claims Division, 30 to the Litigation Division, and 9 to the Operations Division. There are currently 55 attorneys and 39 non-attorneys on staff. These positions are allocated as follows. 43.83 are allocated to the General Fund, 21.52 to the Aviation Fund, and 28.66 to the Watershed Fund. Next slide, please.
The right side of the slide shows the overall operating budget increase of $3 million from $21.5 million to $24.6 million compared to FY23 across all funds. The $3 million or 14% increase is due to the purchase contracted services line in the general fund, where litigation matters are outsourced to outside counsel. The key drivers for the increase is due to 2 class action lawsuits, social unrest cases, post-COVID increased court activity, and funding not based on prior year spending trends. In terms of supply and other costs of $127,000, the proposed budget is flat compared to FY23. Key operational data, the Department of Law is projected to increase the number of claims resolved by 20% from 892 to 909 in FY23. So now we're going to take a look at the general fund summary of operations by major category. The left side of the slide shows the 6 operational areas of the Department of Law: Airport Legal Division, the Business Services Division, the City Attorney Group, the Claims Group, the Litigation Division, and the Operations Division. The right side of the slide shows the proposed FY24 general fund budget of $10.7 million, itemized by major category. There is $5 million allocated to salaries and benefits, and $5.6 million allocated to purchase contracted services. The purchase contracted services line includes outside counsel, litigation expenses, temp service expenses, training and travel, and other basic operating expenses. There's $44,500 allocated to supplies and other costs, and $10,500 allocated to other costs. The other cost line includes business meeting and contingency commissioner expenses. The other expense line has a total proposed budget of $55,000. When you compare the FY24 proposed budget to the FY23 adopted general fund budget, there's an increase of 39% for $3 million, from $7.6 million to $10.7 million. And that increase is due to a slight increase in salary adjustment and an increase in purchase contractor services, which is outside counsel. There are 43.83 positions allocated to the general fund. And for the current fiscal year, the Department of Law is anticipating a general fund overage of about $1.7 million. And that increase is due to those drivers mentioned, key drivers mentioned, the class action lawsuits, the social unrest cases, the post-COVID increased court activity, and the funding not based on prior year spending trends. Now we're going to take a look at the Aviation Fund summary of operations by major category. So this slide shows the FY24 aviation budget of $6.9 million. There is $2.5 million allocated to salaries and benefits, $4.4 million allocated to purchase contracted services, $25,752 allocated to supplies, and $8,748 allocated to other costs. The other expense line has a total proposed budget of $34,500. When you compare the FY24 proposed aviation budget to the FY23 adopted aviation budget, there's a slight increase of 0.7%, or $49,973, from $6.8 million to $6.9 million. And that increase is due to salary adjustments and benefits. There are 21.52 positions allocated to the Aviation Fund. For the current fiscal year, the Department of Law is anticipating an aviation surplus of about $4 million due to more matters being handled in-house. Moving on to the Watershed Fund, summary of operations by major category. This slide shows the proposed FY24 watershed budget of $7 million, itemized by major category. There is $3.4 million allocated to salaries and benefits, $3.6 million allocated to purchase contracted services, $28,764 allocated to supplies, and $8,748 allocated to other costs. The other costs expense line has a total proposed budget of $37,512. When you compare the FY24 proposed watershed fund budget to the FY23 adopted watershed fund budget, there's a slight decrease of $6,361 from $7,029,000 to $7,023,000, and that decrease is due to benefits. There are 28.66 positions allocated to the watershed fund, and for the current fiscal year, the Department of Law is anticipating a watershed fund surplus of about $1.4 million, and that decrease is due to more matters being handled in-house. At this time, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Ms. Kimberly Patrick, who will discuss litigation metrics.
Good afternoon, council members. The slide before you shows litigation metrics for the litigation for the current fiscal year. The litigation division is committed to protecting and defending the city's interests in federal, state, local, and administrative matters. The work they do is substantial and complex. So you'll see that there are 309 cases that were open in fiscal year 2023. 78 were quiet title, 57 were interpleaders, 7 were civil service board hearings, and there were 167 lawsuits related to personal injury, civil rights, employment, and appeals. Now, there are currently 14 litigation attorneys on staff, and they handled 272 of those cases that were open last fiscal year, and that's about 88% of the cases. 37 of those cases were outsourced to outside counsel. They include stormwater and sanitary sewer backup cases, condemnations, personal injury, wrongful death, employee, class action cases, and civil rights and social unrest cases. Next slide.
So this slide will go over our outside counsel spending trend in the general fund. You'll notice a spike in outside counsel spending in FY21 and FY22, which is a result of the number of social unrest cases and one-time costs, as well as those 2 class action lawsuits mentioned. As to FY23 projected actuals, we are anticipating a slight decrease in general fund outside counsel spending of about 4%, from $7.8 million to $7.4 million due to fewer one-time unanticipated costs. The Department of Law did receive an additional $3 million in funding for this expense line in FY23, which will reduce the projected deficit gap from about $5.4 million to about $2.4 million, and we are certainly grateful for that support. In terms of the watershed fund outside counsel spending trend, there was a slight increase in spending in FY22 due to a large number of sewer cases, but we are starting to trend back down in FY23. There's a proposed decrease of 8% from $2.4 million to $2.2 million when compared to FY22. And in terms of the aviation fund outside counsel spending trend, there's a steady decline in spending from FY20 through FY23. There's a proposed decrease of 51% in FY23 from $716,770 to $354,161 when compared to FY22. However, an increase in outside counsel spending is anticipated in FY24 due to airport concessions matters. So at this time, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Ms. Dixon, who will discuss FY24 budget priorities.
As previously indicated, it's our goal to continue to handle legal matters on behalf of the city in an effective and cost-efficient manner. We also are focused on increasing our effectiveness by offering high-quality training and career development opportunities for all members of our staff. What we'll be focusing on this year is the recruitment and retention of in-house expertise in specialized areas, the retention of institutional knowledge. We will be working very closely with the Department of Human Resources as they do the compensation class study, as we are having to compete with other local governments for talented lawyers. And while we believe we offer a great experience, money still continues to be an area where we're working very hard, and the administration is working with us in terms of trying to offer competitive salaries, and finally trying to stabilize our employee base. I think we might have skipped part of the discussion about retention. Ty, I don't know if you want to talk about, we've seen improvement in that regard as relates to the retention of our employees, but we have had some of our talented employees recruited away from us by other departments in the city. So we know we get good people. We like to hold on to them. So I don't know if you want to mention briefly about our retention.
Sure. The retention rate for FY23 is up, is 80%, up 8% from 72% compared to FY22, and the vacancy rate for FY23 is 24%, which is up 6% from 18% in FY22.
This year, we do anticipate, in addition to the normal legal matters, that we will probably see an increase in activity as relates to concessions. I think all of you who've been here before know that when we put those things out on the street, that you tend to get challenges, and so we are preparing for that. We also, with the administration's focus on housing, affordable housing, there will probably be more activity in that regard. And so those in general are the budgetary priorities and what we see in terms of the future of the law department, and we are available for any questions that you might have at this time.
All right, I'm back. Questions? I'm going to start a list here. Thank you. So, Councilmember Shook, you have the floor.
So I just have some sort of general questions, not necessarily related to any of your line items, but let me just say this, just so we all are sure. Your increase in contracted services is anticipated need for outside counsel.
Yes.
Okay. And what's your estimation about the extent to which people who come to work here ultimately end up going somewhere else or staying? Do you have a sense of how that compares to other comparably sized cities?
Interestingly, as you know, I serve on the board of the International Municipal Lawyers Association, and it's an issue that we've been discussing nationwide. All of, particularly the top 50, the largest departments, we meet annually, and recruitment and retention continues to be an issue with all of departments our size and larger. And it's partially attributable to, frankly, compensation, but also just a different approach to the work situation. There doesn't seem to be that desire, and we're having to come up with strategies for how we get people wanting to do more public service or, local government work
Compared
for
to
longer periods of time.
Compared to private practice, you mean?
Yes. One of the things that we offer that we have not emphasized a lot, but we're emphasizing more, is the fact that if they do 10 years with us, that can result in a lowering of their loan repayment. So we do have employees who will stay with us 10 years in order to get a reduction on their loans through the public service loan program. But generally, my colleagues have just said that we just are in a different time, and you don't have folks who have the desire to do local government work for long periods of time. And so we're just having to try to be creative, try to hit them while they're in law school and get them very interested, because while we may not have the remuneration, what we have are the experiences, which are a lot richer than one gets in the private sector.
I would hope that one of the attractions or incentives would be the opportunity to, jump right in and be put in, very high level performance opportunity situations that others aren't going to get. But I guess the other edge of that sword is, in effect, we're providing great training for people who can then
Monetize
go
it.
out the door and sell that.
But you're right. I mean, I think we could do a better job of selling how rich the experience is, and the fact that one gets early responsibility and the opportunity to work on a variety of cases. And so one of the things we've done is to create a subgroup in the law department to focus on telling that part of the story better than we've been telling it.
I think one of the sort of frustrations for us is we all, at one time or another, we need to talk to you about your expertise, or you about this thing, or you about this other subject. And so it's not just one person, but I kind of get the sense lately that more and more of us are sort of necessity going to one person instead of having a stable of people, just because the breadth of experience isn't there.
I would say that, as well as the fact that the person that you all tend to go to the most is someone I have put in a special counsel position to focus on the city council. And yes, she has a breadth of knowledge and institutional memory, which is very helpful. But we also are trying to develop people who will have more of that expertise and be able to spread that around.
And then just last question, how do you balance the need when having to resort to outside counsel of getting the expertise you need to protect all of us and represent all of us adequately, and yet not pay, an arm and a leg in hourly fees? This has sometimes been the case.
Right. When you all brought me in 2018, you made it very clear that we were no longer going to pay silk stocking firm hours. And so we worked very hard to negotiate lower rates. The other thing, though, is that any assignment that's made to outside counsel will also have an internal counsel assigned to it. And I think that's important not only for development purposes, but it also, controlling billing and also controlling the actual work that's done. What I had found was often there were matters that were being farmed out, and essentially all of it was farmed out where there was very little interaction with your internal counsel. And so you don't have the benefit of people learning. You also have the benefit of really controlling what it is that your outside counsel is doing if you just turn the reins over. And so we assign those matters to internal counsel and require that internal counsel is in communication or on calls when we have outside counsel, so we can monitor the work but also learn from that work.
And my actual last question is, do you have a sense of, where we stack up in terms of, I don't know what the metric would be, lawyers per capita or budget-wise?
We've been looking at that, and in terms of lawyers per capita, we actually are doing pretty well. We're consistent with other entities our size. I think what we're researching now is how we compare from a salary standpoint. What has happened locally is a few years ago when DeKalb County adjusted all their lawyer salaries, then you had to rush over to DeKalb. And this year you've had Fulton that has made adjustments, so now you've got to rush to Fulton. And so we're evaluating that and looking at the benchmarks in addition to what DHR is doing to try to make sure that we remain competitive, at least locally.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilmember Amos, followed by Hillis.
Yes, sticking along those same lines of outside versus inside. 23 vacancies, but I see total head count, hopefully in FY24 be 94. Where in the budget would retention, because I don't see a line item where salaries will increase for possible retention and hiring of those 23 of those the underfunded, vacant funded vacancies. Where is that in the budget?
There is a slight increase in terms of salaries contained in the budget. Is that
Yes.
correct? Which we hope will be helpful in terms of being able to recruit and retain good counsel to fill those positions. Currently, a few of those positions that are not filled are filled by contract lawyers. And so because we've got to get the work done, we don't have to pay the benefits, but we do have to get the work done. But we believe that the administration has worked very hard with us to try to fill in those gaps, or where I've had people who were getting ready to go out the door to try to make some adjustment to try to, if salary was the issue, to try to retain them. So I feel confident that we do have a little bit, but we also have some wiggle room to work in terms of the budget. There's nothing specifically other than maybe the slight COLA increases that are anticipated.
And that's what I was hoping to see, other than this $3 million in the purchase and contract services, to where you could tell me some of that would go, like you say, toward retention and vacancies. But you say it's in there. There's a comment you said, and which I would like for you to unpack a little bit more. You said we may see a slight increase in contract services because of the concessions contracts at the airport.
Yes.
And every time we see an uptick. Native of Atlanta, airport has been an issue. Are you saying we haven't gotten that fixed? Are you saying, what exactly are you saying with that statement?
No, what I'm saying is, when you're talking about that much money, then you have people who are going to challenge when they don't get selected. And so you just have an increase in activity in that regard, whether it's a merit less or a claim with merit. You're just going to see an increase, because you're talking about a lot of money. So it's not a matter of anything being done wrong. It's just the nature of the beast. Everybody wants a part of the airport. And I'd like to go back to the $3 million, because Councilmember Amos, one of the things, and I don't think Finance would disagree, that at least during my tenure, that the amounts that have been put in purchase contracts have never had a relationship between what has actually been spent and so there really has not been an attempt to marry that. This year was probably a greater attempt than there has been. But I know it seems like a lot, but it really is consistent and maybe a little less than what has been spent recently.
So unfortunately, it takes me back to my original question: is what line item are we saying we're going to hire more in-house counsel and retain the ones that we have? And is that the regular salaries, that it's only $269?
It's the regular salaries.
It's the regular salaries line item.
But that includes the COLA as well.
It does include the COLA.
Yes, it does.
So that 269, 232 includes a 2.5 COLA for the existing people, the 20, hopefully hiring, the vacancies, and retention. All right, thank you.
All right, next up, Councilmember Hillis.
Thank you, Chairman Wan. Thank you, Ms. Hickson and your team. I'm going to pick up where you left off, because that was the question I was geared up for, and I think I've asked this in previous budget hearings. And as you said, you've been here, I think you said this is your sixth, but we are getting closer in the general fund to what we've actually spent over the past 4 years. But historically, we've budgeted around 25% of what we're actually spending. Watershed seems to be a little closer together, but then you get to the airport and we have the opposite problem when we're extremely overly budgeting what we actually spend. And you mentioned there hasn't been an attempt to marry these up, but that is seemingly what you should do in a budget is look what you've done over the past few years, and that should be your projection for the current fiscal year. So why is that? Why are we still seeing that, especially in the airport? And I know we're getting closer with the budgeted $5 million, but we've historically spent 7 to 8. So can you or finance answer why we're not looking at what we've done and why we're just throwing a number on the piece of paper here?
Well, I'd say this. There was a previous strategy around how we would fund the law department's outside counsel. Surely there is variation from year to year around the activity that takes place. And we've done this here in the last couple of years to really be strategic around a structural budget issue. And we've done that in a couple of departments, the law department being one, by which we did a budget adjustment in fiscal year 23 to address this in outside counsel, but carrying that forward in FY24 to make sure structurally what we've seen historically, which, and I think the law department's done a great job on slide number 10 to show you where they've historically been underfunded in that line item. And so this was a conscientious effort to make sure that we addressed it.
Thank you for that. If anybody wants to make any budget amendments for the airport, you've got about $3.5 million to play with.
We do have concessions coming, that's all I've warned you.
That's true. We'll see how that works out, hopefully in our favor. But that's all my questions. Ms. Hickson, thank you. Chairman Wong.
Anybody else? I did want to ask, so you mentioned the airport potential litigation around concessions, just the challenges, I should say, not the challenges. And you're saying that is baked into the $3 million increase, the additional outside counsel, or we haven't budgeted for that?
No, not the 3 million, because the 3 million is general fund. Yes.
Right.
And frankly, that's where most of our litigation, if you think about it, that's where your police, that's where your personal injury. Airport is a little different because one thing, they do have insurance where there are certain areas that are covered and handled by the insurance. It's just we get those things that are not.
Okay, so the 4.38 million that the airport has for purchase contract services would include any outside counsel we would need to engage in terms of challenges to the concessions.
That's correct.
Okay, I gotcha.
Or any FAA regulatory matters.
Okay. So I on the outside counsel piece, I just want to make sure I understand you correctly. What you're saying is that the level 5.6 million that you're asking for is actually closer to the annual run rates for the last couple of years, right? And do you have those actual numbers by chance?
Yes, they're actually on the slide.
I'm sorry, that's what I get for coming to school late. Can you tell me what page that was on?
So they're on slide 10.
Okay,
So
I gotcha. Okay. Okay, well, I mean, I do appreciate the truing up in terms of restructuring. The last question I have is around the personnel line item. So there was an exercise that was done in terms of looking at actual people in seats right now
whether it's giving an opportunity for speaking, writing, publishing, participating in a committee, those kinds of things. And so that's one approach, is to focus on the professional development of the employees. And I don't know, is there anything you would add to that?
I think you covered it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's unlike fire where we're talking about equipment, right, or uniforms. I mean, that's not, those type of things are not applicable to the law department, but I could see where the continuing ed certifications, I mean, I don't even know if like tuition support is something that would be appealing for folks to be able to continue, go in. I don't know if there are additional
Probably for
certifications.
some certifications, and we do get those occasional. Somebody may want to become a certified ethics and compliance professional or privacy or something along those lines, and where we can provide some support for that, we will.
Yeah. I mean, I believe in investing in the contracted services because, as I've seen, cases are getting more and more complex and specific, and you almost have to get someone who is so well versed on this one particular thread of a law area of the law. But yeah, okay. Other questions or comments? Yeah, Councilmember Boone.
Thank you, Madam City Attorney. Just wanting to let you know that we do see a lot of progress in the watershed claims, and we appreciate you all working with those citizens. How has that been going?
I think it's been going pretty well. We're getting in a lot earlier and attempting to resolve matters before they even reach the claim stage to see if there are things we can do. But we're hopefully you're getting fewer calls about it, and we are certainly working.
We're making a lot of progress in that area. And also, again, I want to thank you all for the hundreds of hours spent on the redistricting. I didn't get a chance to thank you all, but that was a lot of good work spent in the community. Thank you.
Anything else from any of my colleagues? No? Okay. Well, Madam City Attorney, thank you and your team. Again, y'all provide an invaluable service and support to both the administration as well as City Council. I know a lot of times that's not easy to do with the dual reporting structure, but appreciate your navigating through that and guiding us through some of the really complex stuff that we're facing. Look forward to continuing the conversation with y'all. All right.
Thank you.
All right, colleagues, with that, we are actually complete for the day, right? That concludes today's, and we're actually going to end a little early. The next budget hearing day is going to be Tuesday, May 16th. We'll start at 10 a.m. with the Department of Human Works, followed by Human Resources, then followed by Public Works. In the afternoon will be Watershed Management, Aviation, and Labor. Next week we'll resume our regular committee meetings, and thank you all for all being here. So we stand adjourned.